In this module, we'll take a look at a group of letters in the New Testament called the Catholic Epistles, or General Epistles. We will also be looking at the book of Revelation. In the organization of the New Testament, the book of Revelation stands by itself and is not part of the Catholic Epistles or any other group of books. We have included it in this module only for our study. The books that have traditionally been called the Catholic Epistles are a group of letters and include Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st and 2nd and 3rd John, and Jude. In the last several centuries, some churches have begun calling them the General Epistles. To explain the name further, the term Catholic here does not refer to a particular church or denomination, but means one, or universal. These books are grouped together because their content is broadly applicable. They're considered universal because they can be read by different people in various settings. Since we now know what the Catholic epistles are, let's take a look at one of them, the book of Hebrews. This book is written to a group that really understands the workings of God in the Old Testament. The writer understands the nature of both the sacrificial system as well as the history of the Israelites. The very beginning of the book, Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, sets the tone for the ideas the author wants to convey. In talking about the past and present, the writer speaks of the ways that God was active in the past and how he is active in the present through Christ. The author does not see any of the past as flawed, but does see the work of Christ as better than the past. The writer wants us to understand, above all else, the superiority of Christ. To help us understand Christ's superiority, the author points to a couple of ways God worked in the past. In chapters 4 and 7, the author compared our new high priest, Christ, with the old high priest. Under the Mosaic covenant, while there were many priests who served at the temple in Jerusalem, one of them, the high priest, had special status. His position was highly significant, and the requirements of his purity and actions were non-negotiable to God. His most important task was to go into the most sacred place in the temple, the Holy of Holies. It was a place that only the high priest could go once a year and offer a sacrifice to cover the people's sins. As the high priest went into the Holy of Holies, the other priests tied a rope around his ankle so that they could drag him out if God struck him dead. The book of Hebrews describes Christ as a high priest who is not overcome or burdened by sin. Because Christ did not sin, he did not have to offer a sacrifice for his own sins, but only for us. In chapters 8 and 9, the writer changes focus and begins looking at the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. Again, here he is referencing the Mosaic Covenant that guided the Old Testament. If you'd like to learn more about the Mosaic Covenant, you can visit the books of Exodus and Leviticus, which we studied in Module 1, entitled Beginnings. The Old Covenant was based upon flawed and limited sacrifices given by flawed and limited people. The new superior covenant with God celebrates what Christ gives us. In chapter 10, verses 19 through 24, the writer emphasizes the superior work of Christ that allows us to be embraced by God in a new and more intimate way. It is this new work of Christ that allows us to draw near and hold fast to God, as well as encourage the same in others. The writer is not saying that the old is bad, just that the new is better. After talking about the superiority of Christ, it seems that the writer of Hebrews makes a sudden shift in subject matter and wants to explore what faith is in chapter 11. He begins with a definition of faith in verse 1, which says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see." This is one of those verses in the Bible that Christians often quote. So what exactly does the author of Hebrews mean by faith in contrast to what we mean by faith? When we talk about faith today, we usually mean the word hope. We have faith that after working hard, we will be recognized and get a raise. We have faith that our spouse will not cheat on us. In today's society, the word faith means something that we think might or might not happen, but are really not sure of. However, Hebrews has a very different idea of faith. The book described faith not as hope, but as a sense of certainty. Such confidence in who God is leaves no one questioning what God will do, even though others will rightfully say there is room to doubt. Hebrews calls us to have faith in God the way we have faith in the brakes in our car. We have no guarantee they will work. However, we drive fast and come up to stop signs and stoplights, never doubting that they will stop the car. We base the way we drive on the history of our brakes and how they've come through in the past. The kind of confidence we have in our brakes is a type of confidence we are called to have in God. We have no guarantee that God will be faithful, no way to prove what will happen in the future, but we can live our lives in faith because of what we have seen in the past. In chapter 11, the writer shows examples of people who have had confidence in God. Here, he tells of two types of stories: those who have achieved great things because of their confidence in God, and those who have suffered great things. Hebrews teaches that faith is much more than accomplishing things. It is also about enduring things. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 32 through 40, let us know that faith, or amazing confidence in God, is also present in what we endure. The same faith that expects God to do great things should also empower suffering. In chapter 12, the book of Hebrews brings together these two different strands, the superiority of Christ and the power of faith. The writer warns the people that they will suffer persecution for their faith and tells them that they must endure. In fact, the entire book has been working up to this point. The writer is talking to a Christian community that is falling under great persecution. By the time this book was written, it had become the policy of the Roman Empire to torture and kill Christians and their families. Imagine yourself as a Christian during this time. Others are suffering for their faith, and you begin to ask yourself, is it worth it? The book of Hebrews is honest when it says that suffering will come. But by pointing to the superiority of Christ, the writer reminds all people that it is worth it. The only way they will be victorious in this struggle is not only by believing that Christ is supreme, but also by having a supreme confidence in who God is, regardless of whether good or bad things happen to them. That is why he tells them that as they prepare to face the challenge of persecution ahead, they are surrounded by generations of believers who have gone before and endured for God because of their amazing confidence in who Christ is. Having learned about the book of Hebrews, take some time now to apply it to your life by answering the relational questions.